I think we're live on YouTube. I never know, but just in case we are, I'll give a proper intro. What is up, crew? It's your boy Kasem, and today we're going to be talking about human arms, animal arms, and how they relate to each other. So that way, if you've ever wanted to just, first of all, learn how to draw human arms, we're going to cover that today. But then we're also going to cover how you can apply those things all the way to drawing animals, maybe creatures, maybe monsters. Who knows? The world is your oyster, and today's stream, we're going to get to learning. So with that being said, let's jump right into today's stream. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over this cheat sheet that I have here that I made for this specific stream. You guys can go ahead and grab this one over on the Discord channel, which I'll probably share later today, but it's on the Art Resources channel. And also you'll be able to grab today's worksheet. These are free to grab. That way you can follow along, but they're only available while I'm live. Eventually they'll end up on my Discord or on my Gumroad. Okay. So what is this sheet right here? Essentially, this sheet covers a couple of the things that we've kind of covered essentially over the last couple of days, right? So we've covered some skeletal anatomy stuff right here, mostly just understanding the basic forms and how they apply to animals versus how they apply to humans. And then some new stuff here that I covered, which we will really go over today as well, is some of the skeletal anatomy of the arms of different types of animals, right? Different types, but not all of them. The range of motion, and then actual muscles. So this is kind of going to be essentially a recap of what we're going to cover on today's stream. But today's stream in particular, we're going to have a couple references that we're going to use together. So that way, for those of you who are following along, it's not going to hopefully be too scary. Okay? Not too scary. But I think we are live on the YouTube side. If somebody on YouTube could just give a hi, say something, that way I know you're not dead. That'll be great. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started on today's stream. All right. So what do we got here? Let's move some stuff. We're going to talk first and foremost about the good old animal, not animal, the biggest animal, the toughest animal, humans. All right. We're going to jump into some good old human arms. Okay. Let's do that. Oh, and I see people on the YouTube side. Nice. Perry, Ren, Amelia, Micah. Nice. We got some people here. Now, before we go ahead and we jump into essentially, I'll find a cool kind of shot here. I think this one's cool. Before we jump into drawing all the muscles and stuff, I always think that one of the most important things to learn, at least when it comes to the realistic advanced anatomy of these things, is genuinely just understanding how the bones work of the arm. And thankfully, for human bones and for animal bones, they're actually not that complicated. Okay, so let's talk about them really quick. The first thing that is going to be important is going to be known as the scapula. Now, if you've followed along from previous days of my boot camp, you've already seen some of this and we've talked about this. And here I am drawing this one from memory. Hopefully it looks good. It's okay if it doesn't, because we only really care about the major shape of it. And so the human scapula is going to be this nice triangular shape. And if you've ever wondered why the shape is like this, it's actually because of the fact that the scapulas for humans sit on our backs. And they kind of need to glide across, right? Glide across our backs. But because when we raise our arms, this scapula is also actually going to rotate to raise up that arm a bit, right? So notice here, if the scapula is on the back of the arm, there's no reference example here, but let's just say this is the back view, right? And if the arm bone is right here, to raise this arm bone up, you essentially are rotating that scapula up, and you kind of raises us up a little bit, right? So whoop, whoop. And so we kind of have this hinge motion, this hinge shape like this to help that style of rotation. So this is something that I didn't really cover actually in my first bootcamp series, the character design bootcamp, because I didn't really understand, or I didn't have the knowledge of how anatomy differed from animal to animal, right? From humans to horses to big cats to bears to gorillas. But now that I understand these things a little bit better, it's given me a better appreciation and understanding as to why things are shaped the way that they are and why things function the way that they do. So anyways, this right here is the scapula, and we'll label all this stuff later, so don't worry too much. But we're going to go down from here, all right, bring it into downtown, and we're going to just do, I would say about, if you were to kind of just take the length here of this arm, this is going to be where this humerus bone will be. Now, the humerus bone is a pretty long bone in the body. The way that it looks like on the tip right here is it's kind of like a hinge. It's like a ball socket shape that connects to the, essentially connects to the scapula there. And then it kind of has, it's kind of thin, right? Then it has a knobby shape there towards the end. And again, don't focus too much, I think, on like the details and stuff for now, especially if you're mostly, you know, just trying to get into things. I think that's going to be helpful later, possibly. But for me, I like to care more about the overall functionality of everything. Now, from here, from this humerus bone, which is essentially the upper arm bone, right? What we're going to do is we're going to actually go in here and we're going to create a hinge. So this is us drawing the arm from back view, by the way, right? So we're going to go in here like this, and the elbow is actually what this ulna bone is. So if we wanted to draw, let's just say a little bit on the side, how this would look like really quick. I'll just kind of do a quick sketch. So now if we were to just, for example, imagine this humerus bone in front view, right? Just the joint, essentially it would look like it would have it connecting the bigger side like this, and then going kind of thin here towards the wrist. And then from side view, you can almost actually imagine it as if it was a hinge. Imagine like this was the humerus bone, and if it was, let's just say it was like a little hammer thing like this. The ulna bone there, the one that we're just talking about, would almost look like this as it connects to the bottom there of that humerus bone, and then it hinges, right? It kind of goes like this. But you can see here that this cap right here, notice how it sticks out at the end, right? That prevents it from actually rotating all the way back, like whoosh. So like your elbow, as you can see, stops. Once it's fully extended straight, it stops. This little section right here kind of prevents some of that, so that way you don't overextend your elbow. But it does have a good range of motion going in the other direction, being able to almost fully, not fully, but almost fully bring your arm forward, right? So hopefully that makes sense. One's in the chat if that makes sense so far. We are kind of speed running anatomy a little bit here, but I'm trying to give you guys more referential movements of these things and not trying to just bog you with labels and names. I think it's more important to understand the big picture of these things. Also, thank you for the follow, Bulnasaur. Welcome in, Ziggy, and everybody else who's tuning in today. So anyways, going back to this diagram right here that we were drawing, let's go ahead and yeah, let's draw out here this elbow, right? And this elbow, again, we're drawing this one in back view, so we're doing a couple. Actually, yeah, this is back view. Yes, like this. Now, it's not necessarily a back view. It's going to be more like a side view from the back, kind of reaching forward there. So here's that ulna bone, and then what we're gonna have next is a bone called le radius. All right, good old le radius. It's not called le radius, it's just called radius. But the radius bone is a bone that kind of has this little rounded disc kind of ish shape here at this end, and then it's thin, so kind of the opposite here of the ulna, but it's thin, and then it opens out and becomes thick, and actually ends up being the large majority. It becomes a large majority of the wrist, that as well as some of the carpal bones and all that stuff. But essentially, what's kind of unique and special about the radius bone, guys, is, you guys ever heard of a circle? You know what a circle is, right? And if you ask, like, how do you calculate this the area of a circle, right? You get the radius, and then I feel like it's pi r squared, I think, something something like that. The radius essentially, right? And the reason why we're talking about radius is because in this context of this bone called the radius, it actually serves a similar functionality, which is that it rotates, circular motion. It allows for essentially rotation of the forearm. Now, we've talked about this a couple times in previous bootcamp streams, but because this is the dedicated arm day, we are going to definitely revisit it. And because I know sometimes people watch these videos out of order, which is fine, that way you guys can understand it and have a good baseline. But essentially, this right here is just going to rotate, right? Whee! And if it weren't for some of the muscles and if it weren't for some of the ligaments in the body, this shit would be rotating. Woo, 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 and then it would pop off. Like, imagine if you got a chicken wing. You guys know what the chicken wing is? That's essentially what that is. Rotate that, comes off. So thankfully, muscles, ligaments, and all that stuff in between does help so that we don't just lose our bones. You know, you don't want that. But it gives us a good range of motion. Now you might be wondering, Kasim, well, why is that important? Why would a range of motion be important here for humans, right? Like this structure specifically, because as we get into talking about animal arms and stuff, you'll very much quickly find that things ain't the same. Things ain't the same across the board. So the reason why this is valuable is because humans are bipedal. Okay, what does bipedal mean? It means that we are standing up. We're standing up and we walk on our two legs and we're essentially vertical, all right? And because of that too, we also are using our arms pretty regularly, not only to move around, to reach up things, but we're also using it possibly back in the days. I don't want any religious folk to get angry with me, but you know, back in the days, you might use them to even climb, like rock climbing and stuff, right? So that range of motion and that necessity to have to climb or move things up or whatever, grab things, is why we are structured this way. And we're given a lot of range of mobility on our shoulders to wiggle. I would say it's probably the most mobile bone section in our body, is the ability to move around, right? So it's pretty cool. And that's kind of why it's structured the way it is, right? So we have here, again, let me just label a couple things because I don't want to overwhelm you guys. Let's go in here and let's just throw in some labels. Also, thank you for the follows, guys. Who TF is Jinx and Chichiitos. Welcome in. Also, Sean Williams over on the YouTube side. Happy that people are tuning in today, and hopefully, again, you guys are enjoying this stream. You know, it's fairly educational, but I try to make it fun. Yeah, I try to keep it enjoyable out here. So here is the humerus. Now, if you guys have already watched my previous bootcamp videos, and if you've already learned some of these things, don't worry, because we're going to continue and it's going to level up very quickly. But also, I would still pay attention because, again, this information is going to alter and impact how we start thinking about animal stuff and creature design, right? So if you guys wanted to, again, think about creating a humanoid character that's a hybrid of a certain other type of character, we're going to talk about how the anatomy alters that way. So anyways, we have here the ulna, the radius, and somebody had a question earlier, Kasim, how do we know like how the rotation works, right? Because that's a little complicated, rotation and all that stuff. That's a good question, random chatter who said that. Let's talk about how the rotation works and how you can easily remember them. So the first type of rotation essentially is going to be a rotation of the wrist where both the ulna, so ulna right here, and the radius bone, right? Remember that little disc shape right there? Whee! And a whee! It's when they're parallel. So if you imagine the humerus bone like this, right? And this humerus bone, again, we have the ulna on one side. And how do you remember this? Again, the from the joint here, the bigger one is going to be the ulna, the thinner one with the little roundy nub. And notice the positioning too, right? One is kind of like inserted into the middle, whereas the other one's kind of like sitting at the end. That's going to be the first thing. Another thing to keep in mind too is that I'll label it. The radius is going to be on the outer side. Hold on. Let's be careful here. The radius from this point will be on the outer side. Okay, so the radius is on outer side. Now, there's a proper term for this, which is actually lateral. This is how usually they'll refer to this. So it's going to be on the lateral side of this elbow. And then the ulna here is on the inner side, right? Ulna is on inner side. Okay, and this is the, I think, medial. It's been a while since I've covered these terms. Okay, but radius is on the outer side, and then ulna is on the inner side relative to just the elbow. And this is not going to change, right? You can kind of see here, look at your own arm. If you touch yourself right here, ooh, that's the radius right there. I don't know why I made that sound, but that's the radius right here is that little nubby section. And then the big one right here, that's going to be the elbow, right? So you can kind of see it right here and right here. Now, what's going to happen is, this is how I like to think of this. When you have the palm open like this, imagine you are holding a bowl of soup. Okay, palm open, holding a bowl of soup like this. What this means is that your ulna and your radius are essentially parallel to each other. They're aligned. So you can think of it, there's a proper term for this, which is called supination. Okay, supination. And so just think of it like you're holding a bowl of soup. And so you're holding that bowl of soup. And then when you have your hand, right, this is your carpals and your metacarpals for that section there. And then you have your phalanges, which I'm not going to draw. So I'm just going to give little wigglies, little long fingers here. Not the best drawing. You know what? Might as well draw them. You'll have all of these, and this is kind of an easy way to think about it, right? You're holding a ball of soup, or a bowl of soup, I should say, a bowl of soup, and then that bowl of soup is called supination, right? And to be able to hold that bowl of soup and make sure nothing spills, you're holding it palm up. Now, what does this tell us? Well, it tells us then that the radius is connected to the thumb side of the hand, right? Radius is on thumb side. Okay, that's what that tells us. Now, things get a little complicated because, as I mentioned, you rotate, right? So you might say, well, Kasem, hold on, like do this right now with me. Take your hand out, stretch it out, right? Palm up. And then if you rotate your hand, like anybody can do, you'll notice now you might say, well, Kasem, hold on. The thumb is on the inner side now. The thumb is on the medial side. What the hell's going on there? Right? That's kind of weird. That's kind of different. Well, what's happening is essentially what I was referring to, which is the rotation there of the radius. So if I were to take this drawing, it would look something like this. Let me just save myself some time here. It would look something like this, ideally, where the ulna will still be kind of there, doing its thing, but the radius is now going to be on this side essentially now overlapping and creating this cross overlap for the arm, okay? And so that's where that range of motion is. Does that make sense, chat? So you're rotating it like so, right? And this one has its own term as well. This is called pronation, okay? And so if you've ever wondered, for the sake of things, if you've ever wondered how do you go about figuring out which way the arm is positioned, you just want to think about where the thumb is positioned. If you know where the thumb is positioned, you will also know where the radius and all that stuff works. And you might say, Kasem, is this actually important? Like, this is really going to be beneficial to me? Doesn't have to be, right? Again, anatomy is only there to help give you more context on what you're trying to draw. But if you're drawing in a more stylized, simplified look, you may not need to know this. But I will say, if you're trying to draw maybe more of a semi-realistic style, an anime style, or whatever have you, this will actually impact how the muscles look. Because you can imagine, if you were to twist your hand, things would change. And actually, if you take a look at your bicep, look at this. This is my bicep, right? Even this rotation changes the bicep muscle. And the reason why is because the bicep is actually connected to the radius bone, right? And so if you rotate it like that, it's actually going to pull that bicep muscle as it rotates. So there's a couple things that will change, but again, not super important if you're going to be drawing more of a stylized thing. I think what's maybe more important is just understanding the range of motion, right? How arms bend and how they move. And then maybe even arguably the proportions of these things are probably just as important in my mind. And with that being said, when I think about proportions, and we'll talk about it maybe when we draw an example here of the arm, but what I like to do is I like to take, essentially, I have here a couple layers already. It's crazy how much notes we've drawn. Let me just merge this. But what I like to do is I like to take from the head there of the humerus bone, right? This one right here. And again, this is all just generic, loose proportions, not super accurate.
Kasem will be running a 180-second ad break shortly. Thanks for supporting the stream.
All right, thank you for the reminder. But what I like to do is I like to say that roughly about from here to here is going to be roughly the same distance from here to here. So from past the head joint of the humerus, right, which is going to be covered by muscle like deltoids, biceps, triceps on the backside, all of those things. I like to kind of just use a relative proportion. Right, nice and easy to keep things in my mind, honestly. But yeah, and then also we will have a TTS, we will have an ad break in a bit. So this is usually a good time for me to answer any questions in the chat. I highly encourage you guys to use TTS, especially if you have any questions, aka Starlight Production, who I know has enough points to use them. Use the TTS so that way those questions don't get lost in the chat, because you could imagine things get filled up pretty quickly. All right. So with that being said, I think this is going to cover most of the skeletal anatomy, of the human. How do you guys feel so far about this? We're going to have the ad break, so I think this is a good time to just take a breather. I just want to make sure everyone's following along, nothing too crazy. Because I kid you not, when we start talking about animal shit, oh my god, bro, it's actually so hard. Like, it's okay. We're prefacing it. We're getting ourselves geared up. It's actually not going to be that bad, okay? Once we do it, it ain't going to be that bad. So let's talk about how the muscles work in this version, right, in the arm, and then we'll talk about it in back view as well, because it is going to be a little different in back view. So the first set of muscles that I actually like to address is going to be one called the deltoids. Now, these muscles are also known as the shoulder muscles. If you guys have ever worked out, you'll know pretty quickly what these muscles do. They're not the largest muscles in the body, but they serve a big function of raising your arms upwards, right? They raise this bone upwards by compressing, allowing that to pull up, and do a couple other things, right? And take this in mind, because if you guys know anything about, for example, horses can't really raise up their arms. So what does that mean? Well, it probably means that their deltoids are not going to be as important. Put that in the back of your head for now, all right? Think about that, because as you guys will see, the way that I teach anatomy out here, or at least the way that I cover anatomy out here, is that I always think about it from the perspective of the functionality, right? This is what I learned when I was reading George Bridgman's book on anatomy. Something that really stuck to me, and I guess he imparted onto me as I was reading the book, was this concept that learning the anatomy of the body from an artist's perspective has less to do with understanding the muscle diagrams and being able to draw a muscle diagram. What's actually more important is understanding the functionality of these things and how these muscles correspond with each other, correspond with the bones, such that they can do certain actions. I think that is arguably more important from an artist's perspective. But again, everybody's different, right? You could be the artist for Baki the Grappler, and you could really care about every single finite detail of the forearm muscles because that's how the show is presented, or that's how the manga is presented, right? So every artist will interpret it differently, but for me personally, I would like to think that it's more important to focus on the mobility. But with that being said, that is how I teach it, and that's how we're going to talk about it. So we have here the deltoid muscle, good old deltoids, and I will highlight right here in this color. Hopefully this is on a new layer. It's not on a new layer. Hold on, chat. I want to do it on a new layer so that you guys can see underneath. It's okay. Hold on. This is not the hardest thing to draw. Oh, man. Okay. Okay, my bad. Let's go again. All right, so we're going to go in here. So let's talk about the connections of the deltoids. So the deltoid muscles are going to connect to a couple bones in the body. They're going to connect roughly to about the third here, the latter third here of this bone, which is called the clavicle bone. We did talk about this in previous streams, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it's essentially your collarbone, and the collarbone there is connected to something called the acromion process. It's this little nubby section that goes out from the spine, that little ridge maybe section there of the scapula there, okay? So it's going to connect there. It's going to connect to the acromion, and it's also going to connect to the back side of the spine, which we will do on this example when we get there, right? And then from there, it's going to also connect to the humerus bone. Now, the deltoid is essentially broken up into three parts. There is the lateral part, and then there's the posterior part, and then there's the anterior part, right? So the side, the back, and the front. That's the deltoid muscle. Very cool. Very nice. Next, what we're going to cover is going to actually be, I'm going to put this one away now, but what we're going to cover now is another major set of muscles, which is known as the biceps. Now, earlier we talked about the biceps, but the functionality of the bicep essentially is that it's meant to kind of pull, right? Create this motion of pulling the arm this way. That's what the bicep is. So you can kind of see it when you curl your bicep. You're seeing here that compression, right? When you extend your arm, that's the tricep at work, right? I think, or is that the other way around? I forget. I think down is tricep extension, up is bicep. Yeah. So the bicep muscle, when we're looking at it in front view, is going to kind of situate itself essentially nicely here underneath the deltoid. So it's going to connect here to the humerus bone and to the little section there in the scapula. I think it's called the coracoid. So I always forget. Not too important again, because from an artist perspective, you really are not going to see that little bone anyways, right? But we're going to have here the bicep, and the bicep is nice because it just follows parallel to the humerus bone, and then it'll connect to the radius bone, which again, you don't have to know it. You don't have to know all that, right? So for today's stream, I'm going to be very, very broad, and we're just going to label them as bigger sections and shapes. Now, there is a section of muscle that normally I don't talk too much about, but we are going to address it on today's stream because it's actually much more important for some reason on animals than it is on humans. And this is going to be the brachialis. Okay, the brachialis muscle is a muscle that actually sits underneath the bicep, but it helps give it a bit of volume. You almost will never see this muscle except in some cases on the outer side, the lateral side of your arm. For people who have really defined muscles, you'll sometimes see the separation between the two. So this right here, guys, this is the bicep and also the brachialis. Though from a human perspective, again, usually we're combining these two together, right? So it's these two sections of muscle, one underneath the other. Now on the back side of this, you guys probably know this one. This is going to be the tricep muscle. Now we're going to talk about it from back view. It'll be easier to see in back view. But from front view, it's going to just look a little tapered. And actually from this position of the arm, now that I've seen it, give me 1 second. This is, you won't actually see it because I realized that the rotation here, see, this is why it's important to pay attention to the rotation. The rotation here of the arm is actually facing outwards. So instead, we will actually see the triceps from the inner side right here, connecting there. So again, for now, we're not going to see too much of it, so don't worry. But imagine here your arm is kind of going outwards this way, like that. So you're seeing this intersection from the backside. So we have arms. We have deltoids, right? We have biceps and we have triceps. Now there's a few other muscles in there that you could talk about that does exist. For example, there's the coracobrachialis, which you could technically see from the inner side right here. But we're not going to focus on that stuff because, again, this is a video on arms for humans and animals, and things like, for example, the coracobrachialis. I don't even think animals have it. Not all, but like I think there are some animals who don't even have it. So realistically, we're going to talk about the ones that are most important, the ones that are most visible. On the cheat sheet, though, we do cover it a little bit. So you guys can see that right here. There's a little diagram for it. And on top of that as well, you can also watch the Bootcamp from the other Bootcamp series. Now, another important muscle that we probably should really talk about is going to be the bicep, or not the bicep, the pectoral muscles, right? Now, the pectoral muscles are essentially your chest muscles, and these are going to connect over to the humerus bone and also to the clavicle and then also to the sternum. I like to consider this muscle part of the arm as well as part of the chest because essentially it is the bridge between the two, right? It's the connection between the two, from the chest here to the arm, and raising your arm, being able to bring it back, all of that stuff. The chest muscles do contribute to that. So that, in my mind, is essentially the muscles of the upper arm. Any questions so far? You guys all right? I know I just dropped a bit of info, all right? So bear with me. A bit of knowledge there. Let's do in green. We had a question here on the YouTube side. Will you do a boot camp for poses of the animals near a human body, like riding a horse? That's actually not a bad idea, like a humans interacting kind of thing. Well, we'll have a day dedicated to posing and stuff, because that I think will really become easier once we actually have like a better understanding of everything. But yeah. Okay, we're getting some thumbs up on the YouTube side, so I'm assuming you guys are good to go. So now let's talk about the forearm muscles. And then we'll get into, actually, you know what? No. Let's talk about the backside here, because that way we can do the backside of the arm. Now, the backside of the arm, surprisingly, is complex. It's actually very, very complex. There's an interesting set of muscles which are going to be so important. And it's funny because normally I tell you guys, you don't really need to know a lot of these muscles, because these muscles, they're not that visible. Guess what? In animals, very important. These muscles are very important. I would argue that the backside of the arm is actually way more important than the front side of the arm for animals. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But here we have essentially the same old muscle that we talked about earlier, right? The good old deltoid muscle. And that deltoid muscle is going to be kind of just sitting in here. We've already drawn it on the other side, so let me just do it on this side right here. All right. So we're going to go in, boom, fill this one out, nice and easy. There it is. We had a question on the Twitch side, which was, when you learn anatomy, do you have to start with the bone? You don't have to, but I do think that understanding how the muscles connect to the body will help you understand how the muscles work, right? So, for example, as I mentioned earlier, we were talking about the bicep, right? And if you only learned the bicep, right, and you were like, and this is something that I see a lot of the times in tutorial videos, is they'll tell you, draw the bicep with a curve like this, and then draw the tricep like this, right? How many of you guys have seen videos like that, right? This is how they tell you to draw the arms. Bicep like this, tricep like that. But what they don't tell you is, if you don't actually cover and understand some of the skeletal anatomy, again, the bicep, though shaped like this, is not always shaped like this, because in the same position, rotating your arm will stretch the bicep and actually elongate it. And the only reason why that works is because of the fact that the bicep is connected to a radius bone, right? It's connected to bones, because muscles are connected to bones, because the purpose of muscles are to move bones. Does that make sense, chat? The muscles exist to move bones and also to protect organs and all that stuff. But their primary function across the board is to move the bones. So if you learn the anatomy of the muscles, but you're not learning the bones, are you really learning the muscles? Does that make sense? Let me know. But again, that's my opinion, right? But the reason why I say it like that is because in my mind, it's not going to be about learning the bones and the names of the bones. It's, again, learning about the functionality. The functionality in my mind is way more important to understand than just knowing the names and all that stuff. Okay. So here we're going to talk about the tricep, and the tricep on the back view is going to be very prominent compared to how it is on the front side here, because obviously the front side we don't get to see it. But we have essentially 3 heads of the tricep. 3, right? So tri like tricycle. We have the lateral head, the long head, and the medial head. So from back view, you're going to see the lateral head out here, lateral meaning outer. So that's going to be this section right there. Then you're going to have essentially the long head and the inner side. And then you're going to have half of the length of the arm of the tricep is actually just tendon that if you take a look, this is what creates that shape. This is what creates this little, essentially this kind of unique shape that we talked about earlier with the triceps, right? It's mostly the tricep muscle is mostly on the upper half of that upper arm, I guess, upper half of the upper arm. So pay attention to that because that does impact how you might want to draw triceps. Okay. Here's what we'll do. Let me cover the muscles and then I'll talk about the simplified versions of them. All right. Now, when we get here to the shoulder blades, right, there's going to be 4 major muscles of the shoulder blade that, again, some of them are not going to be as important in humans, but will be much more important in animals. The first set of muscle is actually known as the supraspinatus, and the supraspinatus actually connects here to the inner side. This is not even accurate. It connects there to the humerus bone on the inner side, which is covered by the deltoid, so you don't have to worry about it. Then we have here the infraspinatus right here. And that's also going to connect to the humerus bone. And then last but not least, we have the teres minor and the teres major. The teres minor is going to sit into kind of underneath the underneath the infraspinatus, and that's going to connect to that shoulder joint again of the bone. And then the teres major is actually going to connect to the lower section there. So this is actually a little bit bigger like that. So again, I'm going to give you all these names, not because you need to remember them, but just so that you can know them in case you want to know them. Here, as you'll actually see when you look at this cheat sheet, I have a note here that literally says, while the muscles are helpful in making a believable creature, without gesture and rhythms, they will appear lifeless. Practice both. So I'm giving you guys the info, but I'm also going to simplify things for you guys. So that way it's hopefully not too much, too much information. But I do think that the simplifications will only really make sense if you understand what's going on, right? That's how I feel. So if you don't understand what's going on and I give you the shortcuts, the easy peasy shortcuts, they might be helpful for you now, but later down the line, sometimes you'll find that the gap in knowledge can pose some challenges. So we shall cover them here. And again, some of these muscle stuff are on the cheat sheet, right? Hence why I'm not going to cover everything too much at this stage. So again, this is front view, this is back view. Now we're going to talk about the forearm muscles, and then we'll talk about simplifications of those muscles. Now, in back view, we actually have the first major set of muscles for the forearm are actually not even in the forearm. They're actually still part of the upper arm there, and they're going to be called together, essentially going to be called the ridge muscles. Now, what these muscles are kind of 2 sections of muscle. One of them is the brachioradialis, and then the other one is known as the I wonder if you guys can see them. You guys can probably see them on the sheet. But the other one is called like the extensor something carpi. I always forget the name. Extensor carpi radialis longus. Again, long names. Don't have to know them all. Instead, what we're going to do is pay attention to how they operate, which is essentially these 2 groups of muscles, which together kind of will connect to the bottom section there of the wrist. Okay. And I'm going to color this one. Is there a nice color, chat? What's a color we haven't hit yet? Red? We haven't really had red yet, so we'll do that maybe. Okay. So that's the ridge muscle right there. And then we have two essentially groups of muscles that we'll talk about. The first one is going to be known as the muscles here. They're going to be the ones in this section like this. And this one is going to connect to the...
Kasem will be running a 180-second ad break shortly. Thanks for supporting the stream.
Cool. Those are going to connect essentially to the end, the outer end, the lateral end there of the humerus bone, and then those muscles will kind of go all the way down to the wrist, and those are going to be known as the extensors. Okay, and the way that I try to remember this actually is that the extensors are going to be on the backside of the hand, and then the flexors are going to be on the inner side, the palm side. And they're actually going to be separated here by the ulna bone. So that elbow bone there, that ulna bone, we're going to separate that like this, and this will be on the back side. And I'll color this one hot pink. Do we really not have a hot pink? We don't. And that's mostly it. Yay! That's a lot of info. I know, but let's talk about it here on the front side, and then that way we can simplify it afterwards, all right? And then we'll get into animal stuff because we haven't even gotten there yet. So here in front view, when we look at the arm in front view, essentially what we're going to have is going to be mostly comprised of that ridge muscle right here. Okay. And then on the inner side, because of the positioning of the hand. Okay. So we're back from the ad break. Let's talk about some things, right? So this right here is arm and back view. And then this right here in the bottom section there is arm in front view. Now you might say, Kasem, bro, ain't that a bit? Ain't that a lot? And you're right. It is a bit. So let me give you guys the easy peasy version. Okay. For those of you who want the shortcuts, you want the cheat sheets. You're like, Kasem, bro, I need just give me the, give me the cheat sheet, Kasem. Here's how you can do it, right? And this is why I gave you guys this one right here for reference. This will be good practice, okay? So take this reference sheet for those of you who are following, and if not, that's okay. And I want you to figure out where, first of all, some of these landmarks are. So here we have like, the shoulder section there. And all it is that's going to be most important is going to be, one, understanding that the deltoid is going to be this major shape, right? Then we can have the bicep is going to be this shape right here. Then the tricep right here. Then in this view, we're going to have the, what's it called? Actually, it should connect like this. We're going to have the ridge muscles. So if we were to label the major muscles of the arm, it's going to be deltoids, biceps, triceps. That's going to be the upper arm. Then extensor, flexor, and ridge muscles. Or supinators. Sometimes they're called supinators too. Okay, and so this right here is upper and lower. So three for the upper, 3 for the lower. Ain't too bad, I think, right? And if you practice this, we'll go and do another example. This is the deltoid. Also I guess we can count the pectorals, right? But here's the deltoid right here. The bicep group, because again, it's technically there's other muscles in here that we're not going to talk about, like, again, the brachialis, the coracobrachialis, right? Let's not worry about that. The tricep right here. Then right here, we're going to have the ridge muscles. Again, how do we know the ridge muscles? Because they're on the outer side, which is essentially the thumb side. And then we have right here the flexors. Makes sense. Let's do this one. This one's kind of fun because it's rotating. So here we'll have the deltoids. Pectorals here. Biceps. The triceps. Then here we'll have the ridge muscles rotating to the thumb side. Then we'll have the extensors here, and then maybe a little sliver of the flexors on the inner side. Does that make sense, chat? So I would encourage you guys to do this practice on this sheet. Try to use this one as reference, and oops, my bad. Fill in the blanks. But I would say those are going to be the three like major muscle groups there that you'll probably want to know. Okay. Any questions? Any questions so far about the muscles of the arms, at least from the human arm perspective? I'll let you guys type in the chat if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, if you have no questions, we will talk about animals. The struggle and challenge of animals. Someone says, what about hands, KSM? Well, hands are hands, arms are arms, right? We're going to get to hands a different day because, as you can imagine, animals have different hands than humans. So, yes, we will savor that piece of information for a different day. What about apes? They also have different hands than humans. Slightly elongated, slightly different structure, different padding as well. Slightly different. All right. So I think we're good. Will we cover birds? Well, do we have birds? Yes. Are birds animals? Yes. As I've mentioned, guys, this is a long series. Animals come in different flavors. So what I'm doing for you guys is first giving you the bare bones. I'm giving you the basics of animals and humans and how they relate. Then we're going to start branching out and moving away from, the standard, for example, gorillas, which are most similar to humans. We'll get into talking about horses and quadrupeds. Then we'll get into transitioning to avian style animals, right? Then we'll get into reptilian. Then we'll get into amphibian, like frogs. And then, we'll even cover fish as well. Literally the bare bones, exactly. So yeah, I just wanted to give you guys, a little bit of a start. Insects we will not cover because insects are technically different from humans. We're going to be covering the vertebrate side of the animal classes. So unfortunately, no insects will be covered in this boot camp, but maybe we will. Maybe we'll have a dedicated day for insects, spiders, and that variety. But for now, it's not necessarily. Okay, so I think we're good, right? You guys have ones in the chat if you feel like you have a better understanding of arms so far, at least from a human perspective. Hopefully we get a few ones right here in the chat. And again, some of this might just be a refresher for some of you guys. A lot of you guys might already know this if you've been watching my streams. You definitely know this, right? You've seen me cover this dozens of times. But let us now get into the world of animals, because this is where shit gets kind of crazy. Okay, so let's talk about quadrupeds first, because I think quadrupeds are the most common type of most animals, right? Animals walking on all fours. Honestly, there's not too many animals that are, I actually don't think there are. Are there any animals that are just regularly walking bipedal? Might just be us, fam. Might just be us. Flamingos? Okay, well, we don't count birds. We're not counting the avian. I guess specifically mammals. From the mammals section, are there any mammals that are commonly walking around? Kangaroos. Okay, there's a few. Cows, I wouldn't. Cows are not. Wait, you guys trolling? Cows are not walking on bipedal. Monkeys, but monkeys are not always walking. That's the thing, right? I'm talking about animals that are like always walking on all two. Kangaroo is a good one, actually. Meerkats mostly are walking on all fours. They only stand up, really. So for the most part, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of bipedal animals. But I will say kangaroo is a great example because you can kind of see how their structure is very different. Very different from other animals. They got thick legs, they got small hands. It's kind of interesting how they've evolved, but despite that, those guys are fighters. So anyways, going in here to understand how to draw the arms of the animal, we must first position the human in a way that helps us understand how it works. So if you were to imagine a human being on all fours, okay, like a dog, like this, that would mean that the scapula that we have here is going to go look essentially something like this, right? Simplified version. Okay. Then we're gonna place all the bones and all that stuff, right? All the stuff that we talked about. I'm gonna speed run this one, but essentially we're gonna have the socket. Okay. And then what we're gonna have is when the arm is extended out like this, essentially we're gonna have the ulna bone, so the lower arm bone there. And then we're going to have that the wrist, pay attention to this, right? So the radius now, which is on the outer side originally, that's going to twist across right there. And essentially, this is going to give us a hand. If we were to draw them like, again, like an animal. This would give us something that looks like this, okay? Now, when we talk about the anatomy this way, it's going to be interesting because, well, first of all, hold on. I'm going to make this its own layer. When we talk about the anatomy this way, you're going to start to see a couple interesting things. One, remember how I told you guys the deltoid muscle connects to the front side of the arm, right? So here we're going to have essentially two heads of the deltoids. We're going to have the lateral section, and then here the posterior section now in front view. Does that make sense, chat? So the shoulder is now being rotated when the arm is, you know, laying down like this. And so it's kind of shifting forward just a little bit. Okay. Here we don't really talk about it too much because this is more of the back view, but this is going to be the lat muscles. Oh, sorry, not the lat muscles. The trap muscles over here. Okay. And then essentially right here, let me give it a bit more volume for the deltoid there. Then we're going to have the triceps, which are going to sit right here. But because of the positioning of the hand, right? You got to pay attention to the positioning of the hand here. But because the hand is positioned out here where the elbow is out, like imagine you were doing a push-up. You guys ever done push-ups before? One's in the chat if you've done a push-up, right? You'll notice that the elbows, if you do a push-up like this or like this, right? They're going to be kind of pointing outwards where the tricep is going to be facing out. So this right here is essentially the tricep muscle going in like this. Then what we'll have is maybe a little bit of the bicep, but we'll also have the brachialis kind of peeking through there. So bicep, brachialis, and then last but not least, we're going to have those ridge muscles, which are going to wrap around Let me add a little bit of a bend here because it's going to be hyper extended. Ridge muscles. Then, because we're seeing the backside, we're going to also include the extensor muscles. And then last but not least, we'll throw in some flexors on the backside here, because again, we're seeing the palm of the hand a little bit. And this right here is essentially the positioning of the human body in this position, right? We'll also add here the lats, is what I was talking about earlier. And here we won't see the chest muscle in the from the shoulder section, but we will see it roughly here. Okay, so this right here is how a human would look like if, like, let's say like a track athlete, right? They're gonna gear up, they're getting ready to get in position, they're essentially kind of walking on all fours. Here's the brachialis, and then a little bit of the bicep there. Then we have the ridge muscle in red. Then we have extensors. Then we have flexors. Okay. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I forgot. There's some more muscles. There's some more muscles on here. So here with the scapula, right? Remember how we talked about the scapula and stuff? So the scapula here is also going to have now that muscle right here, which is the infraspinatus, as well as the teres minor. And then in there also is going to be the teres major. So I'm just using these colors that we have here. And then we don't have any color yet for the traps, so I'm going to give it a poopy brown. Yeah, because someone said make it a poopy brown color. This one's for you. Okay. Poopy brown. Chocolate. And then maybe we'll do a color for the lats. I think this color of blue is nice. Oh, hold on. Oh man, I lost my layers. Oh, there you go. Sorry, it was like so many layers out here. Who would want that? Yeah, I don't know, man. Chat be weird sometimes. Chat be asking for the wildest things. Okay, but let me know, guys, if this makes sense so far. You guys are good so far, right? This is just us taking all the info that we've learned about arms and stuff, and we're just repositioning it, right? Matter of fact, take a look at this. Watch this. If you take this arm, and if you just go like this, this is the same thing as when a Dragon Ball Z character does a blast, a little energy blast, right? That's the same thing, guys. Don't think too much about it. You see that? Same thing. Just facing downwards. One's in the chat if that makes sense. The same position. But now we're just rotating it down. Okay? Does that make sense? You see it? So with that being said, let's talk about animals. Woo-wee. Woo-wee. Whoop-de-doo. So also the arm was a little long here. Let me just highlight, or let me just color these areas in blue, the areas that we're not going to cover today. So we're not going to cover the pectorals too much. We should. Maybe we shouldn't color this then in blue. We should color this in gray. I'm running out of colors, chat. This is a problem. What do we do? Okay. That's going to be the pecs. Okay. So this right here is how we're going to be positioning essentially our person, and how we can start thinking about quadrupedal animals. And the primary quadrupedal animal that we're going to be focusing on is actually going to be the horse, but maybe if we have some time today on stream, we'll talk about other quadrupedal animals like big cats and, dogs, because they do change a little bit. But I think horses are a good place to start because it's a pretty common animal that you might draw. So if you guys remember from my last stream, we had some tips and tricks that I did for showing you guys how I drew the baseline for these animals. Now, I started off here with essentially the shoulder section, which is known as the thoracic sling. Then we have a barrel section right here. This is going to be the rib cage section of the pelvis. And then last but not least, we'll have a section right here for the neck, like so. And I'm just going to use this basic mannequin for now to just kind of give you guys a rough idea of how I think about the horse. The horse technically is extended all the way up here, but for now we're going to cut it similarly the same way we've cut the human. And then from here, I'm just going to go in and erase some things. Because now we're going to fill it in with the actual structure of the animal, right? So first, let's just focus on the arms. So we're not gonna focus on any other parts. Now the first thing is, you'll notice that the scapula of a horse, guys, is going to be different than a human. So the scapula, again, being the shoulder blade there, it's going to be different. And the main reason why I would say there's two major reasons why the scapula is different from a human, why the horse is specifically different. The first one is that because the horse is quadrupedal, it means that it's mostly walking on all fours. And so instead of having the animal have to reach up and, do things like climbing and stuff, it doesn't need to do that, or it can't do that, really.
Thanks for supporting the stream.
And so the scapula gets shifted to the side of the rib cage, right? So if you take a look at this diagram right here, you'll see how the scapula now is kind of shifted forward, and eventually what happens is it becomes longer. So the scapula is much longer than a human scapula because of the fact that it's being used to kind of slide against the side there of the rib cage. Now, the other reason why it looks like this is because horses are primarily built for speed, right? They're really there to be moving around. They're not really hunters. They're not like a leopard, right, or a jaguar. They're not there to hunt. And so, because speed is their primary thing, they've actually I was going to say they've been modified, but their bodies have been altered in a way that support this action of speed. One of those things is that horses don't have collarbones. You know how we talked about collarbones for humans and how that's important? Well, guess what? Horses don't have collarbones. And what ends up happening is, because they don't have a collarbone, this shoulder blade, this scapula right here, is not really connected to anything. Skeletal wise, it's almost like a floating bone that is being held together by a bunch of heavy muscles, and these muscles kind of allow it to stay there. But because the scapula is like kind of floating, it actually creates really wide range of motion for the horse to be able to gallop and kind of stretch far, gallop as it's moving. Does that make sense, chat? So, as I mentioned, we have the scapula, we have the humerus bone here, and pay attention to how the humerus bone is, one, smaller, right? Way smaller. It's actually it's smaller than the length of the scapula, especially compared to the human. Like the human humerus bone is almost twice the length there of the scapula. In horses and in most quadrupedal animals, you are going to have the opposite. The humerus bone is a lot smaller. And then for hooved animals, this right here is actually going to be the ulna on the backside, and then the radius on the front side. And they're going to be fused together. Okay? Now you might say, K-Sam, hold on. What does that mean? The ulna, the radius is fused. Well, there's a couple things that this means. One, it means that just like with the human positioning here, how we had the ulna here like this, and then how we had the radius on the front side, a lot of it has to do with, again, how the arm is positioned, right? So this is why I think relative anatomy is so powerful, because now we're understanding why, like in this position, the human is going to look like this, right? And so similarly, the radius will be on the front side of the horse's arm. But this will be fused together because that's just how they are able to support their structure. So for better stability and for standing up all the time. Horses and cows are almost always like standing up. So they need to have better support for that. So they kind of have this fused structure for the radius and ulna. And then we get into talking about the rest of the structure here, which we won't talk about too much. but I'll quickly gloss over them. We have the carpus here, which is essentially the same thing as the hand. Then we have the metacarpal fused together. So the fingies, there's a little bone there at the end there. And then we have the phalange, section 1, section 2, and then the hoof nail. Okay. So this right here is a good old horsey. Okay. Good old horsey. You can start to see the comparison, right? The difference, but also the similarity between the two. So again, I'm not gonna give you guys the names of these, the horse anatomy, because I don't want you guys to feel like you have to remember horse anatomy. It's more just comparing the two between them and see how they work. So now that we've done that though, let's talk about the fun part, which is the muscles. So somebody asked, how does the scapula connect to the rest of the body? Is it connected to the rib cage by muscles? Yeah. And there's, again, quadrupedal animals are going to be special because they'll actually have a set of muscles that humans don't have, which are going to be part of something called the thoracic sling. Okay. So in return for not having that clavicle, animals like horses will have something called the brachiocephalicus and the transversius or something like that. Again, we'll kind of gloss over them, but I'm going to give you guys the general version instead. So yeah, all muscle stuff. But let's talk about muscles, because boy, oh boy, you guys are gonna be like, hey, we just learned all this. We learned all this animal or human anatomy to not have to learn any of it for the animal stuff. You're gonna be like, what the hell? All right. So first off, let's talk about the deltoids, right? So as you guys can see, the deltoids in the human are like placed along the scapula. So you would think, right, that the horse deltoid is also going to look maybe like this, right? Because that's kind of how it looks like in the human. And if you thought that, chat, you are absolutely wrong. Goofy ass assumption, okay? Goofy ass assumption, which also, by the way, I also made this goofy ass assumption. Matter of fact, horses are weird, okay? I'll say it right now. If you're a horse fan, sorry, your creature is kind of weird. The deltoid of the horse actually sits in here on the spine there, but also on the edge of the scapula like this. And then it actually connects here to the front side of the humerus, okay? So this right here, this is the deltoid. Okay. It's going to get even weirder than that. Now, just like how the scapula here has this this supraspinatus, right? We're actually going to have that as well. This still exists. So the supraspinatus will connect here on the upper part there of the scapula. And then this will also connect to the humerus bone to help give it some support. You know, we like supporting the shoulder bone there, which, by the way, this is the shoulder bone of the horse, right? It's on the front side of the animal. And then what's also going to be wild is if you pay attention right here, you'll see how we had that little sliver. This right here, this is the little sliver of the bicep, because the bicep is facing forward, or sort of facing inward. And we technically have a bicep too for the horse. It's going to go here. But let me ask you guys a question. Do you guys know why it's called bicep? You know why there's the bi in there? Like, what does bi mean? Two, right? Yeah, bi means two. And so you would think, okay, bicep 2. But guess what? Horses, even though they have biceps, it only has one head, not two heads. Why, you might ask? Well, why is it, if it only has one head, why is it called bicep? Because unfortunately, people have named these animals, and they like to have relative anatomy. Unfortunately, and this is going to be the start of a lot of the confusion, because even the deltoids, as I showed you here, normally for humans, the deltoid has 3 heads. In a horse, they have 2 heads, right? The bicep ain't a bicep anymore. It's actually just 1 head, but we still call it the bicep because functionally it kind of still has the same function, right? It's called the bicep brachii. And this right here is going to be a first kind of set of muscles. Now you might say, all right, Kason, this ain't too bad, brother. You're right. This actually is not too bad, thankfully. We have some relative muscles that we're working with. But that's actually just the tip of the iceberg, because now you remember this muscle right here, this green one, this one called the infraspinatus. You guys remember this one? We talked about it, right? It's this one right here. This one right here. This green one right here. You guys remember that one? Well, horses have that too. The wild part, though, is that for some reason, and I kid you not when I say, like, there's not a lot of art resources that teach animal anatomy. There's a few, obviously. I don't want to, discredit anybody. There's a few, but there's not a lot. And so a lot of how I've learned the anatomy is straight up from watching vet videos on YouTube and looking at vet medical websites. And so I have been... You guys don't even understand. I've been watching videos of animals being dissected, like they do in the good old days, for medical reasons, obviously, not for wild reasons. And this is how I know all this stuff. Okay, it's really hard to find this stuff on the internet. But this right here is the infraspinatus, and for some reason, the way that the horses are built have it so that, guess what? This muscle actually covers the deltoids. You might be wondering, Kason, well, what the hell, bro? Muscles just be flipping like this? They just be doing flippity flopping? And yeah, they do stuff like that. Now, the reason why is actually because, again, it all has to do with the fact that horses are straight up built different. Unlike humans, which again have the collarbone and that section, and they even have the acromion, right? Remember that I told you guys there's a thing called the acromion process? We kind of briefly glanced over it, but it's this little nubby right here. Horses don't have that. Horses have no little nubby, okay? They don't need the little nubby. And so because of that, their deltoids, bro, they don't really do much. They're not doing much like how humans have them. And so instead, most of the deltoid is actually covered now by this muscle that otherwise before was behind the deltoid. So now they've kind of swapped places. Little whoop-ah, switcheroo. And to add to spice things up even further, you then have the tricep muscle, right? Good old tricep muscle. And the tricep muscle, which we had here for the humans, this is actually going to sit all the way and essentially create majority of the mass of the horse. Like this. That's all tricep, bro. So horses essentially are doing like push-ups all day, every day. They're just standing there and they're doing these. They're focused on gains. So that's all tricep. Right there, chat. Massive, big arm muscles right here for our boy. Horses do not skip this day of working out. Okay? So we have here again, these are going to be, I would call the more outer muscles, right? We have the, let me fix this. We have essentially the deltoid muscle, right? Then we have here the tricep muscle. So we have the infraspinatus, then we have the tricep muscle, and that essentially covers majority of the horse upper arm anatomy. But there's even more, because for some reason, again, as I mentioned, the horses, their biceps, they only need one head of the bicep. Why they only need one head is because horses are primarily standing like this. The function, again, of the bicep for the human is that it brings the arm up, right? Brings the arm up for us to be able to do a curl, all that kind of motion. Horses are not really doing that. Maybe occasionally they'll like lift their leg up like that, or they'll do a little whatever. Otherwise, they're not really doing that majority of the day. It's not really a big function. But what is an important function for them is connecting that upper arm to the lower arm. And so horses will actually, more than anything, have a prominent brachialis. Okay, so they're going to have a nice brachialis muscle there. And then more important than that is they're going to have the ridge muscles. And those muscles are going to be the ones that are going to be a little bit more, I would say, prominent. So here we have these muscles on top, okay? The biceps, they basically get hidden. They're not even visible. So as far as you're concerned about horse anatomy, guys, and like most quadrupedal anatomy, just delete the bicep. You don't even need it. Biceps, gone. Whatever. Now we're going to get into the forearm muscles, which essentially here is the extensors, right? And this is the same as humans, thankfully. Yay. Ain't too bad up in here. And then here we'll have the extensors. And then we'll have the hands, and then the hooves, and all that stuff. Okay, well, wait, hold on. Horses have biceps. But as far as we as artists are concerned, they don't even show up. So, yeah, as far as we're concerned, forget about it. You don't need it. You don't need any of that stuff, okay? You're good. So we have here the brachialis, all that stuff. Now let's talk about some muscles that we do know, right? We have the lat muscles. So the lat muscles are actually going to cover here. They're going to cover the infraspinatus the same way that they do. Oh, sorry, the supraspinatus. They're going to cover it the same way that essentially it's covered for humans. And then the other thing is it's going to kind of wrap around here. And we didn't cover the spine, but there is a spine and there's a dorsal thing. We covered that on a previous day. So for now, don't worry about it. But essentially this right here is the trap muscles, right? Same ones that we have for peoples. We got them here. Excellent, excellent. Oh, I forgot to mention. You know how I told you guys the tricep, right? So tricep, guess what? Tricep is 3, right? Horses, they only got 2. So horse triceps are actually just 2. So technically they should be called biceps, but that's okay. They're called triceps because, again, relative to humans, that's what they are. And then when we get to check this out, when we get to dogs and big cats, For some reason, they have 4. Their triceps have 4 heads, but they're still called triceps. So, yeah, that kind of stuff, you know, it exists. It's out there. It's a little confusing if you were to ask me, but, you know, it is what it is, I guess. But okay, this is going to be the lat muscle, or not the lats, I keep saying lats, the trap muscles. But while we are talking about lats, let's go ahead and throw the lats on there. Now, the lats are pretty chill. Probably the most unchanged of the group, right? I also want to note here that even though the lats and the trap muscles look like they're the largest muscles, do not be fooled, guys, because the lat muscles right here, these back muscles, they're actually thin. They're actually very thin muscles, thin, long sheet of muscle. So don't be fooled, okay? It's not actually gonna do much. Not really flexing. But there's one more set of muscle here that, again, we have not yet talked about that I think is gonna be relatively new and introduced to. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I shifted things. Yeah. Why'd I shift? There you go. There's going to be one set of muscles which are new that I will introduce to you guys. And I will give you the proper names of these things verbally, and they're going to be on the cheat sheet. But I'm not going to write them down because I don't want to have to spell it. And the set of muscles, kind of like how there's ridge muscles for the forearm, we actually have a set of muscles known as the muscles for the thoracic sling. And these muscles are comprised of 2 sets of muscles. It's the brachiocephalicus and the transversatilus. This is a crazy long ass names. And these muscles actually connect all the way to the head, to the skull, and essentially support the movement of the neck, but also support the structure of the, of the shoulder there. So for this one, I'll give it a fun color. What color do we have left? Orange, a vibrant orange, maybe. Okay, that's not as cool as I thought it was going to be color-wise. And that's going to overlap there and cover up the supraspinatus and essentially cover up, you can see here how the bicep, all that stuff, it basically gets covered up by a bunch of things. And last but not least, we're going to include the pec muscles. So we got here some examples of horses. Okay, horses. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk about the first, we're going to highlight all the muscle groupings, right? And we're going to talk about how they work and stuff. And then we're going to talk about the simplifications. The simplifications. So let's talk about them. So let's take a look here at this horse, because you're looking and you might be saying, damn, Kason, bro, this is a lot of muscle. There's a lot of hoob going on here. What exactly is happening? Fear not, my friends, because now that we've understood the anatomy of the horse, we can actually go in here and lock in. We can start piecing together all the pieces. Check this out. This one right here, you see this? Don't worry about it. We fear a lot? No. Don't worry. I got you guys. This one right here, that's going to be the thoracic sling muscle right there, right? That grouping of muscle that we talked about, the brachiocephalicus, right? And then the later down the line, right here, we're going to have, take a look at this. This right here is that infraspinatus, okay? Boom. This right here, we didn't talk about yet, unfortunately. But the chest muscles are actually broken up into 2 sections. So we'll maybe save that a different day. But for now, we're going to have the chest muscle right here, 2 parts. Okay. Then here, what we're going to have, this right here, this massive big boy right here, that's going to be, fear not again, that's the tricep muscle. Okay. Then you're going to have, oh, hold on. There's a muscle on the inner side here. Do I have info on that inner side muscle? I think I should. Let's see. Yeah, here, look at this one. Okay. Yeah, the pectoral muscle right here is essentially this section as well of the pectorals. So it connects to the radius ulna section. Huh. That's kind of cool. I just thought it was up here, but it's actually down. It's even down there in that section as well. Cool. All right. Good to know. So anyways, going back here. So when we get to this diagram, this is why it's good for me to check it. I was surprised. I was like baffled. So we have here the, essentially we have the brachialis right here, right? Then we have this, which is the pectoral muscles. Very interesting. Then from here, all of this is just going to be the extensors, right? So we don't worry too much about that. There's a little bit of bone and stuff going on there. And then the flexors are on this side. So we have these groups of muscles that we've highlighted. And you might say again, K-Sam, this is a lot, man. This is a lot of info. So how do we simplify this to make it a little bit easier? So what I've come to learn is that what's really nice about studying the animal structure is that essentially this arm right here, this arm of the horse, can actually just be broken down into this zigzaggy shape like this. This right here is the diamond shape there of the kneecap. And then following down, the hoof there of the horse. So what exactly is this form structure that we're working with, right? And here we can make the kneecap a bit bigger. Because I think this is a little bit easier to remember, I think. So what we have is essentially the thoracic sling. This section is going to now create the shoulder of the horse along with the infraspinatus. Then the tricep is going to go here like this. And it's just going to create this nice wedge shape, right? This diamond shape right here. That is just essentially the lower arm of the horse, right? That's it. Then you can have the chest muscles, which we can kind of block in. So when you're going in here and you're thinking about drawing the horse, if you don't want to use the reference and if you don't want to try to figure out the anatomy and stuff, just realize that essentially those muscles will create a nice wedge. Similar to how, for example, with the arm of a person, right? The deltoid, the arm of the deltoid, the shoulder there, will create a wedge from the tricep here, like that. And then you have the bicep like that, right? That's the arm of the person. In back view, right? In back view. It's the same concept. See that? Bam! Arm. Snaps. You can do the same trick for the horse. So for the horse, look for that diamond shape like that. And then that's it. And then all you need to do is this right here, shoulder muscle. Boom. This right here, tricep muscle. Boom. Right? This right here, group that shit together. That's going to be forearm muscle. Then we'll do a diamond kneecap. Right? Boom. Diamond kneecap. And then the rest we'll cover another day, which is hands. Or hand, I guess. Finger. Now tell me, chat, this is easier, right? This is a little easier. Simplified shapes. I like it. You guys like it? The vibes? You guys rolling with the vibes on this one? We go zigzag techniques. Picasso. I like it. I like my Picasso. my Da Vinci's. Like that, zigzaggy shapes. Now, again, there's also rhythms to it too, right? Rhythms are also useful to pay attention to. So pay attention to how you have like thick, thin. Okay, I realize they both start with TH. THI. TH. I'm just going to write it. Thick, thin, thick. I was going to put T, 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 T. T. Thin, right? Thick, thin. And then you could imagine the hoof. Thick. So all of this is to say, if you take the anatomy and you apply the stuff you've learned from the anatomy, it'll make it make more sense. It'll make it easier to process, right? But that's why I kind of like to go through it all, because I think it is valuable. So now let's take this and let's run the gamut here across some other examples and hopefully see if we can practice it as well. I'm trying to find a better spot for this. I'll put it here for now. See, but now you guys are learning drawing horses ain't that scary, man. Ain't that scary. Once you learn the baseline techniques, once you learn what they actually mean, bro, it ain't that bad. It ain't that spooky. All right. So now let's get into a couple examples. We're going to just quickly bash through these examples. And then we're going to do another final exercise, which maybe I will leave as an exercise to you guys to do as well. But for this one, we're going to just do the same thing, right? Now we're going to focus on simplified shapes, and you're going to see it. Like, bro, once you see it, you cannot unsee it, chat. It's one of those things. Once you see it, wrong button. Once you see it, you're going to laugh because it's that easy. But what I meant to say is, once you see it, it's all good, baby. Life is good. Life is easy. Take a look with me. Watch this. Shoulder muscle, right? Boom. Tricep muscle. Boom. Oh my God. And then forearm muscle. Boom. Diamond shape. Boom. Hands. Another diamond shape. Boom, boom. That's it. See how quick that was? Fascinating. Then we'll do the chest. Boom. Oh my goodness, bro. And then here's where it gets OP. Because if you guys remember, I told you guys that technique, right? The technique for drawing horses, so easy. You just go like this. You find the rhythms. Right? You find the shoulder blades there, like that. And you go here like this. Right? This is the horse stuff that I taught you guys about, the gesture stuff. Then you can kind of fill in the barrel. And then you take this gesture. Go like this. And then you do the same thing. You go like this. You go shoulder, triceps. And then you go boom, boom, diamond shape. Bro, look at that. We're drawing horses from imagination. Oh my goodness. And that's the power, guys. You see the vision now. Boom, boom. You have to do the sound effects. If you don't do the sound effects, you're missing out on literally half the technique. Half the technique is the sound effects, okay? Isn't that crazy though? Like, in all seriousness, I think this is like crazy because now essentially I can go in here and yeah, I could draw a horse from imagination using the good old anatomical structures that we've laid out. Not too bad. Not too bad. Obviously, it's good to practice gesture. It's good to practice, some of the basic things. But it's that simple, right? All it takes is following the first 4 days of the boot camp. If you follow my boot camp series, you too will be able to impress people by being able to just draw animals from memory. It's wild. Well, let's do another example because we've been doing a lot of standing ones, a lot of simple standing ones, right? What the hell is going on here? Fear not, my friends, because look, the same stuff still applies. You see that right there? Same stuff still applies. The 4 days you missed, it's okay. It's okay. Those are permanent. Those are on the YouTube channel. You guys can consume those at your leisure. All right. So fear not. Those will still be there. And then here, look at this. That's the neck muscle, right? Again, the crazy neck muscles. But that's going to be that diamond shape, diamond in the rough. Then here we got the forearm. Now pay attention though, because this right here, the diamond shape, it's going to be flat, right? And the reason why it's flat is because you guys have to remember this is the carpus bone. This is the carpus bone right here. And so you have to pay attention to how it's flat right here, right? This is the wrist effectively. So imagine if you took your own hand and if you bent it like this, you're creating this like section right here, right? That's a little flat section right there. That's kind of what's going on here is a little flat section. Then look at that massive, massive muscle. We'll add a little damn extensor flex. Chill out, bro. Horses out here doing arm workouts like nothing. And then boom, boom, boom. Let's see. Can you draw a Clydesdale horse from imagination? If I knew what it was, if I knew what the Clydesdale horse was, maybe, yeah, one of these days, I think I'd have to look at a Clydesdale horse. I don't mind you guys. Again, I'm a fake horse fan. I'm not a real horse fan. I don't know any of the horse names, anything like that. So please don't at me on that one. All right. Do not be like, hey Sam, actually, can you draw this one? Because I don't know it. I'll be real. I don't know the different. The only horse I know, guys, is Megan, the stallion. Boom. Okay. Anyways, let's go do some examples. Now that we have the horse stuff, right? Let's talk about maybe drawing these for other animals and how do they apply. And that's what this example here is. We've got a lot of variety. Now, guys, I should mention, it's probably maybe a little late now, but if you guys have not grabbed these sheets, these are free to grab, guys, on my Discord channel. And guess what? They're only available while I'm live. Which right now, if you're hearing this message right now, I'm live right now. So guys, join the Discord channel. Hop in, grab this sheet, follow along with me. Because let's be honest, man, how many of you out here watch tutorial videos on YouTube and you're not actually following along? But you think you know what's going on, right? You think you know, and then you try it yourself. What happens? You realize you don't know anything. You're like, oh shit, hold on. I just spent 10 minutes watching a tutorial. Huh. So this is the best time to do it. Do it with me live. Let's follow along. Grab this worksheet. Grab this cheat sheet. And because somebody, aka Funky, did drop 6 gifted subs, hit that sub goal, we have even another sheet right here that is free to grab as well. And these are only available, guys, while I am live. So please take advantage of this because I'm out here trying to make free art education a thing. All right. I kid you not, because I've been looking for it myself. You will not find, I think, an extensive animal tutorial video series that is free. I think I can actually confidently say that I have been making the most extensive one so far completely for free. This is not to say it doesn't exist, because there's legends like Aaron Blaze and what's her name? Carrie, I think Carrie. What's her name? Terrell Whitlash. Like, these are people who've made tutorials and stuff, but they're paid. Ain't nobody crazy enough like me to be making free stuff out here for free. I don't know why I do it, honestly. It's because I love you guys. It's because I love this community, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why.
Ad break shortly.
It's because I grew up poor. That's really it. But I think I'm the only one who's actually gone and made tutorial videos in depth like this over the last 5 days for free. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. Okay. Well, we have an ad break that's gonna happen. So we'll get started, but I'll talk about what we're going to do, right? So here I found this example of essentially the skeletal structures that somebody drew. I don't know how accurate they are, but that's okay. We're going to be focusing on adding muscles to the arms of these, and I'll talk about how they're different, how these are different from horses, right? Because we did talk about the horse and stuff. You guys should know, though, that this will be easier. Okay, this will be easier than the horse, because they're going to be more similar to humans. Yay! Kasem, do you have a favorite animal? Obviously, big dog. That's my favorite animal. You know, I love dogs. Come on, obvious, bro. Kind of question was that, chat? So let's talk about some of the stuff now. Thankfully. Animals are going to be a little bit easier. These animals are going to be easier because these are more your standard flavor of animal, right? So here we're going to have the trapezius muscle here, right? Of this animal. What is it, a fox or something? Then, unlike the horses that have freaky ass shoulders that have the infraspinatus coming forward, thankfully, we're in a good spot because here we'll actually have the deltoid muscles. They're back, baby. Let's go. The deltoids are back. It's literally just like this diagram right here, except just a little bit more changed, right? They're going to have bigger, much more massive triceps. That's really it. That's like the big difference between animal like these quadrupedal mammals versus maybe us. They just got bigger triceps. What can I say? They're on all fours all day. I think if we did the same thing, if we were doing push-ups all day every day, we'd probably have massive triceps too. Actually, matter of fact, look at gorillas. Those guys are beasts. Anyways, we have this, right? The tricep muscle. And then we're gonna have here the brachialis muscle, right? All of that stuff over down yonder. And actually here, we can move it so that you guys, where is it? You guys can see a little bit there, right? And then we have the extensor muscles, the flexor muscles. And then, actually, just like horses, the neck muscles are going to be very, very prominent. And actually, matter of fact, this one should actually be further up because it's got a lot of fur and stuff. And then we got those neck muscles that we talked about. And in this case, we can kind of group them, but essentially, this is it. And I want you guys to go in here, fill in the blanks, boom, 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 you know, draw the rest of these animal stuff. And then next stream, I'll say this now, next stream, we are going to talk about the legs. So today, we spend most of our time talking about the arm of the animal, right? Next, we're going to talk about the legs. And then that way, we put them together. We put 2 and 2 together. 2 plus 2 equals 4. 4 legs, quadruped, they make an animal. And then from there, we're good. Because once we've learned about the arms and the legs, we're going to be able to draw a majority of the animal. Then we'll do a special stream for feet and hands, okay? Like claws and paws and hooves and all of that stuff. Then we have a few more things. We'll have the head. We'll cover the head of the animal, the head and the neck specifically. And I think from that, sky's the limit. We're going to do creature design. We're going to break down other animals like birds, reptilians, amphibians, mammalians, avians, right? All that stuff. But anyways, guys, thank you again for tuning in on today's stream. This is going to be the part of the stream where we say bye to YouTube. Twitch chat, we are not done yet, but let's everybody on Twitch say bye to YouTube. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed today's stream. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you found it valuable and challenging as well. But with that being said, thanks again. Thanks again, YouTube side. Bye, YouTube. If you want to hop over to Twitch, here's a link to hop over to the Twitch stream, okay? Oh, I did it in all caps. Kind of scary. All right, bye, YouTube.